Welcome to Lessons in Dyslexic Thinking, conversations with the world's most inspiring dyslexics, where we find out what dyslexic thinking is and how each of us can employ it to change the world. Today I'm joined by the founding CEO of Virgin Unite, Virgin's not-for-profit foundation, and brilliant dyslexic thinker Jean Oelwang. We've known each other, Jean, for 20 years, believe it or not, and you and Richard were my earliest supporters in my first campaign. You founded Virgin Unite along with Richard in 2003. With a mission never to accept the unacceptable and to unite business, governments and NGOs to solve the world's most urgent problems. You've said the common thread is by bringing together those collections of leaders, we're upping the ante. We're dreaming big, it's audacious, so we can tackle some of the most difficult, interconnected issues. That sounds like dyslexic thinking and very big thinking. Welcome, Jean. It's an absolute honour to have you with us today.
Thank you, Kate. And before we start, can I just pause for a moment and just say congratulations, because what you've created over the last 20 years since I first met you is just simply extraordinary. And again, you and your team have done a brilliant job to get the people in the world to think about dyslexia in a radically different way.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Tell us more about how you think your dyslexic thinking has helped you to do what you do. And of course, you work very closely alongside one of my most favourite dyslexic thinkers, Richard.
Yeah, and I would say, I have learned a ton from his dyslexic thinking. And for me, it's all about creation, and it's all about how do we come up with innovative ideas and how do we be audacious and think big and really focus on never thinking that anything is impossible. And that's really been the mentality that Richard has had since the start of Virgin Unite. And I have learned a ton from him in how you never, ever, ever let anyone stop you from doing something that's going to drive significant impact in the world. And I used to kind of have a philosophy of urgent patience, and now I've come to a philosophy of radical impatience, because we're running out of time in the world right now. And one of the things I love about dyslexic thinking is that I believe one of the reasons why we're in such a mess in the world is because we've had only linear thinking, and we haven't started to shift and think about how do you approach a problem in a different way. And that's where dyslexic thinking is so beautiful, because it approaches problems like no one else is doing right now. And that's what we need in the world, is a different set of thinking, because it's almost as if someone has smacked a big red reset button, and now the world knows that our systems need to change, but they're not doing it at the pace that we need to. So dyslexic thinkers coming in can help speed up the pace.
It's also, as a charity, very, very entrepreneurial, isn't it? It really is a case of doing things very differently with an entrepreneurial mindset, which not many charities do.
Yeah, and Kate, we wanted to do that from the very beginning. We didn't see ourselves as a typical charity. We wanted to turn the charitable sector upside down, and we didn't want to focus just on one issue. We wanted to focus on our approach, and it was an entrepreneurial approach, and thinking about how do we change systems and issues for good. So how are we not just treating the symptoms, but how are we actually changing the systems? And again, I think that links back to dyslexic thinking, where you're not just band-aiding a problem and trying to save one person or two people, you're trying to change the entire system so that you can have long-term impact.
Yeah, it's going to the source and fixing it.
Yeah.
And you have done some absolutely extraordinary things. I've heard you talk about the elders, which is just mind-blowing. Tell me about how that came about, and what was it like to work with the people within the elders? It must have just been extraordinary, and still is, obviously today it still exists.
Yeah, and first thing is that I haven't done the extraordinary things. I think, again, linking back to dyslexic thinking, it's not been us on our own. We've always made sure that we collaborate to bring together others that will be exponential in terms of impact when we bring them together. So we've incubated about 20 of these initiatives right now, and they've all had that collaborative effect at the beginning. And I feel like that's in large part due to Richard, because as he's been so dyslexic over his life, he's really become a master at understanding where his strengths are, what he can do well, and then who we need to surround ourselves with. And with the elders, it's just been the biggest privilege of my life. We had the good fortune in the early days. It was an idea that Richard and Peter Gabriel had. And we started it really with Mandela and his amazing wife, Graça Machel, and then Archbishop Tutu became the first chair. And I think with them, I'm not sure how many of them were dyslexic thinkers, but they certainly had that ability and that sense of humility to understand, again, where their strengths were. And I watched them in the early days. I became fascinated with how they became who they were in this world. And what I realized early on is they were who they were because of the amazing people they surrounded themselves with, whether it was each other, whether it was their partner, whether it's people they worked with. And that's how they became these great human beings and were able to have such great impact in the world.
You're just surrounding yourself, delegating, knowing your strengths, surrounding yourself with other people is just such an incredibly important thing to do in change making, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think dyslexic thinkers do that more often than others because they've had to go through a tough time to figure out where their path was in life, often through school or whatever. And Richard certainly went through that in his life. And so I think they've learnt about bringing people around them that can help make that journey a better one. And so they don't have to do it on their own. And they realize that that's actually a better path. And certainly all the elders realize that coming together as a collective, that's where the power and the strength was, is when they merged all their strengths and they had all that different type of thinking around a table, from, Kofi Annan, who ran the UN, to Ila Bhatt, who was running one of the largest charities in India, to Archbishop Tutu. It was just this amazing, and it's still today, this amazing group of people that all think differently. And so when they come around a table, they're able to approach solutions not with just one direction, but they're able to come up with third ways based on their combined intelligence to come up with an even better solution. I've seen them do that again and again.
And do you ever get intimidated by the size of the things that you're trying to tackle?
I'm humbled by the incredible people that I get to work with and the amazing things that they've delivered and achieved in their life. But I don't become intimidated by the size, because I feel right now in the world, we need big thinking, we need big ideas, we need audacious ideas. So for me, getting intimidated would slow me down. And instead, what we do is we gather people together that can help us get on that journey. And then it's less intimidating when you're not doing it solo, but you're actually doing it with others to get to that point. And then it becomes a lot easier and a lot less stressful along the way.
What are the other things that you're doing at the moment that you're most proud of or most excited about?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I'm so excited about right now is something called Planetary Guardians. And we're working with an amazing group of scientists who came up with these boundaries that we need to stay within as humanity to stay in a safe operating space and not cause catastrophic damage to the planet and humanity. And it's this amazing group of 19 incredible leaders, and they're super diverse. They range from people like Sylvia Earle and Jane Goodall through to Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, President Santos, the former president of Colombia, and then this amazing cadre of young leaders like Jie Bastida, Aisha Siddiqa, Farwiza Farhana. And one of the things that I absolutely love about this initiative is the intergenerational conversations, as well as the diverse cultural thinking, the diverse background from a sectorial perspective. And it's just creating these incredible, rich ideas on how we get people to understand the planetary emergency we're in. And the other project that's been amazing is the B Team. And that's a group of entrepreneurs and CEOs that came together. And I can guarantee that probably at least 60% of them are dyslexic thinkers. And that's why they've created these amazing businesses. And again, that's been another beautiful one where they've come together with this really beautiful mission around making business better for people on the planet.
You're obviously creating some massive projects with massive global change, but change comes in all different sizes, and it's easy for anybody to create change if they know how. What would be your 3 tips for any change maker wanting to make a difference in the world?
Yeah, and thank you for framing that question in that way, because I do feel like sometimes we think purpose has to be this massively big thing. And in reality, if we can do something in our local community, in our local school, if everything matters right now. We all need to do absolutely everything we can in the world that desperately needs it. And I guess my 3 tips, the first one would be to listen, to really listen to the people that you are actually wanting to help drive the change with, because they have the answers. Like dyslexic thinkers, and I'm sorry, I can never say that word dyslexic, apologies, but dyslexic thinkers know what the solutions are. They know that the way that they're thinking is a solution. And, Josh Turner had a beautiful quote where he said, "We're not the problem, we're the solution." And so I feel like listening to the people that you're trying to work with is the number one. I think the second thing is never go it alone. I think way too many people in the world feel like they have to be the sole one driving something or have to be the hero. That's how we're taught from the time we're little, is that we have to be the superhero. And in reality, no change happens just with one singular person. So the second thing I'd say is make sure you build a set of deep connections around you that can help you drive that change and help you be exponential in your change rather than singular. And then I would say that the third thing, actually I'm going to cheat and do 4. The third thing is to make sure that you're thinking big, whether again that's in your local community. And when I say big, it doesn't mean that it has to be on a global scale. It means don't underestimate the power that you have to drive change in this world, because each one of us has some type of power to make a difference. So don't underestimate that. And the last thing I'd say is have great joy. And, Archbishop Tutu used to say that joy is a discipline. And that always sticks in my mind, that the world is at such a discombobulated place right now that we each have to be responsible for bringing that joy to the table and making sure that we bring that joy. Peter Gabriel used to say that joy is the oil that makes things happen. It greases the wheels to make things happen much more quickly. And I really believe that. So that would be the last thing, is just have joy in what you're doing.
That's really beautiful. And my last question for you, if you had one piece of advice for other dyslexics, what would it be?
Yeah, and thank you for helping me understand that I am dyslexic, because I didn't know that until I started working with you guys. And that's been a revelation to me, thinking about all the times that I perhaps was not listened to or thought I was crazy. We talk about that a lot in Virgin Unite, that when we started the elders, when we started these other initiatives, everyone called us crazy because they were before their time. But we kept on going, and we found other crazy people that came around with us. So one thing that I would say to dyslexic people is celebrate when someone calls you crazy, because it's probably a great idea that is way before its time, and just keep on going and persevere. I remember, Kate, when you started with dyslexia 20 years ago, or even probably before that, 20 years ago is when I met you. It was probably thought of as a crazy idea. And look at where you are now, and look at how many people are starting to be proud that they're dyslexic. And so I'd love to ask that question back at you. What would you say to people that are trying to drive change?
I think I would say anything is possible, and just believe you can do it.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it an extraordinary thing when I'm interviewing somebody and the question ends on me? But thank you so much, Jean. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I think what you guys are doing at Virgin Unite is just extraordinary, and the help that you give us and the encouragement and enabling us to really dream big is really very special. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you right back at you, because I think working with people like you, Kate, gives us inspiration. Because I think in today's world, sometimes it's hard to have that hope. And it's people like you and the team that Made by Dyslexia that give us that hope, because it shows us that people aren't giving up, that they're not living in a place of fear. And that's what we need to turn around in the world too, is figure out, how do we stay in that place of hope? How do we keep on acting? How do we keep on driving? How do we be innovative? And that's, again, where I think dyslexic thinking has such a significant role to play.
100% does. Thank you.
Thank you,
wonderful.
Kate. Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Microsoft, who, like us, are passionate about empowering dyslexic thinking. Their free learning accelerator tools like Reading Progress and Reading Coach help dyslexic thinkers thrive. Find out more by clicking the Microsoft link in the podcast notes. And if you'd like to find out more about what dyslexic thinking skills are and how to recognise them in schools, at work or at home, you can take our free training now. Empowering Dyslexic Thinking in Schools, available on Microsoft Learn, and Empowering Dyslexic Thinking at Work, available on LinkedIn Learning. And please subscribe so you don't miss out on future lessons in dyslexic thinking.